Welcome back to another great video. So today we are going to demystify what Layout.tsx is in Next.js application. Now, to anybody who has created a Next.js project previously using a simple term like create next app, right? A simple command that creates a Next.js application, you might see something like this. Yeah, something like this in your Next.js project when it uh, pumps up for the first time, right? So you will observe that in the app folder, there's a pre-created file, auto-generated file called layout.tsx. Now, what exactly is layout.tsx? Now, that is something that we are going to look at. So here's a simple Medium article that I have written. So this is basically a video format of a Medium article that I have written. So the usual thing is that I write a Medium article and next day I shoot a video for it and we are all golden. Okay, so let's look at what exactly does a layout.tsx contain. Now, according to Next.js themselves, a layout file is used to define a layout in your Next.js application. Now, when I read this for the first time, I understood nothing, zero, nada, right? So let us simplify it. A layout.tsx is the topmost component of a Next.js file. So for example, you are creating a front-end project. A front-end project will be created of a lot of components, right? There will be a lot of components, but all the components, if you create a diagram of them, like in what component, what other components are part of, so you will realize that you are technically building a tree. Now, this tree is also commonly known as a DOM tree. So it might look something like this, like you have an HTML, then inside HTML you have a body, you have a few divisions, and in the divisions you have H1 tags, UL tags, buttons, and many more, right? Here's the code version of it, and here's basically the diagrammatic version of it. So when I say something is a top element, when I say that body is a top element of div, then it means div is contained inside body. It is a descendant of body, right? Now, similarly, when I say that layout.tsx is the topmost component of a Next.js application, then that means that layout.tsx has all other components as its descendants, right? So that means if you have created three components, A, B, C, all of these will be directly or indirectly a child of our layout.tsx file. Cool. Now, even though you don't understand this completely, just imagine it as something that is on top of this whole food chain kind of thing. Okay. Now, as I say, since layout is the topmost component in an Next.js application, so it totally makes sense that HTML tags and body tags would also be a children to this layout component, correct? And not just children, but rather HTML would be a direct children to layout component, since everything that we write in a web project is inserted inside the HTML tags to make it work. So that's why the usual flow is a layout component is there, and inside layout you might observe that there are HTML and body tags. So just to show you an example, if I go back to our VS code, you might see that this is our layout file, and inside the function you will observe that there is an HTML tag and there's a body tag. To the people who have already worked with Next.js, they might have observed that you will never see an HTML or body tag, this native HTML or body tag, inside any other component except layout.tsx. So that is the importance of a layout file. It defines the layout of your website, right? Layout of your project. Now, in general term, in English, pure English, what does layout mean? So layout means a general structure, a common structure of your whole project, your system, your machinery, or whatever you're building, right? So that means whatever you define as a layout will be common throughout the application, throughout all different components that are part of the game, right? So basically, you should use layout.tsx to define things that are common across the board, across all the components, all the pages, all the web pages that you're building, so that all these things are not re-rendered, right? So if you put the stuff that are part of a layout.tsx file, these stuff will not be re-rendered since these are common across the board. So Next.js makes a smart decision to not re-render these components, but rather render them once through server-side rendering, which is of course the benefit of Next.js. So for refresh everybody, server-side rendering means pre-rendering your website or your HTML code or your website code on server side and sending out the whole rendered website back to your client. Now, traditionally, what used to happen? All different files, your HTML, your JS, your CSS, your images, all these used to come in different parts into your client side, and there it used to compile them, connect them, render them, and used to create a whole website out of it. But this used to waste a lot of time. So that's why the concept of server-side rendering was introduced. Server-side rendering renders stuff on the server side so that you don't have to do it on the client, and the whole process becomes faster. But this should only and only strictly be used for cases or the type of code that is not dynamic, that does not change on user interaction or any other factor, right? So the stuff that changes or that is dynamic or changes frequently should be rendered on client side, since the client side is better at handling these changes faster. If you do it on server side, for each change you will need to make a request to your server, wait for its response, and then the pages would be loaded, which will finally make the whole process slow, right? So going back to the topic, since as I said, layout.tsx remains pretty much static across the board, it is by default rendered at server side. So this is a very important thing to keep in mind, because you will see a lot of different caveats that come further when we go in a lot more cases regarding layout.tsx, right? So which makes some things work in the layout file and some things not work in the layout file. Okay, so let us move back to our article, right? So we know what layout.tsx is, we know what is a part of it. As I said, all different components are part of this layout component, right? So but how do I see that programmatically? So if you see, this particular function, the layout function, has a prop called children. Now this children is basically each component or each page that you're going to render. So based on your routing, this children prop is populated with whatever needs to be rendered on your screen, and this makes all the stuff easier. And this basically this makes sure that your layout stays intact, but the children component that needs to be changed are changed on every different route that you have defined. Okay, so now you know that there's a children prop which is passed on to your layout function, and which takes care of the rendering as follows. Okay, now a few more things that might come to your head is that, man, Apurv, I know that I have an HTML defined in layout. I know that I have a body defined in layout. So why not put head as well in layout, right? It makes sense. You have an HTML, you have a body. The one thing that remains is head. Yeah, the good trio. No, bad trio, right? So a head tag is basically something that defines your metadata about your website. So it might contain your favicon, it might contain the title, right? Let's take the example of title, simplest example. So how often does a title change in a website, right? So for each web page that you open, open web page 1, it will have title page 1. If you open web page 2, it will have title page 2, right? So each web page will have a different title. As I told you previously, a layout will include stuff that is common across the board, that remains static most of the time. Title will keep changing on each different page. It makes no sense to put head in a layout file, because then for every different page it will make a server request and render everything slowly. We don't want that. So that's why Next.js comes with something else called metadata API. Now I will not dive deep into metadata API right now, it is not scope of the video. But a metadata API lets you achieve the head tag functionalities in each of your page or each of the component that you are rendering, right? So that it becomes part of client side rather than purely server side. So I hope that makes it clear. This is specifically why I and Next.js encourage that please don't put head in layout.tsx. Okay, now let's move further, man. For anybody who is interested, there's a link to metadata APIs docs in the particular Medium article, so you can go to that and yeah, knock it off. Cool. There are few other things. Now, the common question that you will see across the internet is, why should we not fetch URL path variables, right, in your layout file? For the people who don't know what a path variable is or search parameters, it is something usually as a parameter that you provide in your URL, right? So for example, if I write here a question mark and write name is equal to Apurva, right? So this is a search param or a path variable. So this is the name of the variable and this is the value of the variable which you can access programmatically in your code, right? So to access that programmatically in your code, Next.js provides a hook called use search params, right? There are a few other ones you can use, a use router and other stuff, but yeah, use search params is also part of it. So use search params lets you access these path variables in your Next.js code across different components and yeah, across different pages, right? But Next specifically tells you not to use this particular hook or similar hooks in a layout file. Why? Because as I told you, layout file is going to be static across the board, right? So if layout file is going to be static across the board, at least that's what Next assumes. So it doesn't waste time in re-rendering it for each different page. So once the layout file is rendered, it is rendered. Next.js will forget about it, right? So if when it is rendered for the first time and it has some such param, right? It is very much possible that Next.js will not grab the new search param if it is changed, because Next.js innately assumes that layout is going to be same across the board, including the particular URL, right? Including the particular search param. So Next will not catch your changes you have made to the new search param or the query parameter. It might not get updated and it will lead to a lot of inconsistencies. So stick your use search params back in the pages or the components. Please don't put them in a layout.tsx. Now, this, I guess, catches all of the majority caveats or the points that might confuse you with a layout file. If you have never heard of layout file, this might have given you a good basic understanding of what it is, a summary of it. And yeah, man, rock on, keep on coding. Let's see you in the next video. Make sure you subscribe, like, and do whatever else you can on YouTube these days. Bye.